All right, everybody, we're going to get started and present about letters of recommendation and then some added information on what to do with all your college visit information. I am Roxana, and I'm here with Jenny, and we're here from College Com. And today we're just really going to go in and talk about letters of recommendation and show you some things in terms of what your recommenders will be filling out on your behalf and sending into colleges, because we really want students to know before they ask what they're asking their recommenders to do. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what to do after, of course, lots of college visits that'll happen over spring break. So in terms of topics, we're going to be thinking about, you should be thinking about who you want to do your letter of recs. We'll talk a little bit about how many and what teachers would be a really good idea. Certainly, if you're working with one of us as your counselor, we are absolutely happy to talk with you about what you think might be good ideas and kind of talk you through it. Then we also want to talk about there's different parts of the process in terms of letters of recommendation. That's what LOR stands for. And then there's a secondary school report, right, which is something else that's on the common application, as well as a counselor report. So we're just going to go through kind of logistics on those things. And then we're going to share with you a new tool that we've kind of put together to help you kind of break down what you see and how you feel after a college visit. So the first thing to know, and one of the things from a broad perspective to think about, is that there's a lot of different factors in students' applications. And no one factor is going to determine whether a student gets in or not. One of the things on here that's actually over on a second part, but there's testing, right? Testing, you can have a 1600 and it doesn't mean you're going to get into the college of your choice. But in terms of the application and what's included in it, you've got your transcripts, you've got a secondary school report that has a counselor letter, you have a letter of recommendation. The school could ask for one or possibly two. You have the written part of the application, your personal statement. You've got supplemental questions, which are essay questions that are really particular to the institution that you're applying to. And then there's a part where you put all your activity lists. And everything that you do. And what we're trying to do is really talk today about sort of the side of the screen that is secondary school report and letters of recommendation as the part that goes into your application.
So really why colleges need these letters of recommendation is because it helps admissions provide an outside perspective beyond test scores and grades of the student. So it helps them understand the student within the context of his or her classes. So most colleges who request letters of recommendation want anywhere from 1 to 3, as Roxana said, but they want them in the core subjects that a student is taking. And it's really important that the teacher who is writing the letter of recommendation really knows your student. So sometimes students will think, hey, it's best for me to get a letter of recommendation from a class I've gotten an A in, but actually it may not be the best teacher to get a letter of recommendation from. It might be one that maybe you struggled in that class, but you went in for extra help and that teacher really knows you. So really, colleges are going to accept anywhere from 1 to 3 letters of recommendation. Typically, they ask for students to ask a teacher in their junior or senior year in a core subject, which would be math, science, English, history, and a world language. Students want to ask teachers who can speak to their skills and character or someone who knows you best. And again, they're providing those unique insights on what makes the student a scholar, a friend, a competitor, a leader, a citizen, those kinds of things in the classroom. So it's best to ask a teacher who can assess your skills versus the teacher who you got the best grade in. If you look down below in the background information, this is directly from the Common Application, their teacher evaluation form. So in addition to what the teacher is writing, they actually fill out a form via Common Application. And the first couple of questions are background information, so they know how long the teacher has known the student and really being able to like describe the student and what class they were taught in. So that's the initial information that they would get.
So just on a side note, in terms of recommendations, it's really important to note that the UC system does not need letters of recommendation. The Cal State system does not need letters of recommendation. There's a lot of public institutions like the University of Arizona doesn't care that much about letters of recommendation, and neither does University of Washington. So, but there are some public schools that will take them. If a school is on the Common App, typically they will allow students to submit a letter of recommendation. Just so that. So, and here's what they're asking the teachers to discuss. And I think it's really important that students think about this when they're thinking about who they're choosing. The first thing, I actually showed this to a student today, and she looked at this top box, right? Ratings compared to other students in his or her class year. How do you rate the students in terms of? So the whole form is set up actually to rate you against your peers, which should not necessarily freak you out at all. The teachers are usually really nice about it and things like that. But that's what they're asking in terms of how you operate in the classroom. Do you contribute your ideas? Are you someone who helps the group that's falling behind? Are you a very, quiet but astute listener? And when you contribute, it's something incredibly thoughtful. But when you look at this, you're going from below average all the way up to one of the top few I've encountered basically ever teaching, right? So there's a huge range here. I would say the majority of teachers honestly are not going to choose below average, average, or good, right? Usually the ones that you're going to choose have seen you in a pretty good light. But there is a lot of variation here at the top. And they're looking at, if you go down the left side, academic achievement, intellectual promise, quality of writing, creative and original thought, all the way down to maturity, leadership, self-confidence, and things like that. When you have students that are looking to get into very, very competitive schools, and having been someone who read applications at Stanford, it was not rare for us to see students whose teachers thought they were definitely in the top 5 to the top 1% that they'd ever seen. So it's important kind of to like note that and understand how competitive those schools are. But what this does is add value to your transcripts, right? There's a lot of students that are going to come in with a GPA somewhere between a 3.8 and a 4.2 at highly selective schools. What they want to know is, what is the student like in the classroom? Which for them translates into what they're going to look like in the classroom at the university and with the professors on campus. The last part below is basically, in addition to this matrix, they attach their own personal letter of recommendation that explains with examples and specifics in terms of how they know you and what they've seen and things like that.
So in general, colleges that require letters of recommendation will say so under their application requirements. This slide is kind of to show you like where to find that information. And it's important to check the actual website to see if they have stipulations or say specifically which area they would like to see a recommender from. So in cases such as engineering, they may say, we'd like to see a science teacher recommendation, or in cases of, business, they might want to see a math recommender. And so I think that's just important to make sure that, you're not just checking the Common App or the Coalition application to see that they need 1 to 2 recommenders, but that you're also checking your school's website to see if there's anything specific that you need to let them know. And like Roxana said, UCs and CSUs generally will not need letters of recommendation in the initial phases of the application process, but some of the special programs like UCLA Nursing or UCSB Creative Studies may require them. So it's really important to check the specific programs to see what exactly is required. And then Berkeley has been known to ask for letters of recommendation later in the process to help evaluate their applicants further. So you can find all of this information on the college's website. This is Pomona's website, and I just highlighted the school report and counselor recommendation, and then the 2 letters of recommendation that's required from the teacher. They also say that you can submit optional letters, which we'll talk a little bit about in a few minutes. So, well, in a few minutes, like the next slide, sorry. Additional recommenders and when to use them. If you have a, a special talent in art, music, or athletics, and in fact, if you're applying to a music program or the performing arts or any kind of visual art, they may actually ask for a recommendation from your teacher or an additional recommendation from somebody who knows you based on your talents. And they may be included in that performance portfolio. So it's just something to check out and make sure that you know all of those requirements. And then down below this screenshot is from University of Wisconsin, where they say, hey, if you choose, you can send an additional letter of recommendation from a clergy member or from somebody that you worked with or a volunteer supervisor. And I would say if you want to submit an additional optional letter of recommendation, just make sure that it's not more of the same of what your teachers are saying, but something that can add value to your application. So somebody who knows you in a different context than that of your teachers. So that's, I think, important and can give them a full picture of you, but only if it adds, somebody's actually reading all of these. So I think it's important if it adds more. And then in addition to your teacher evaluation and letters of recommendation from your teachers, there's what's called either a counselor report or a secondary school report or a counselor letter. So the difference between a counselor letter and a teacher letter is that the counselor is writing about you in the context of your whole school, so not just in that class. And here she is talking about what opportunities you took advantage of within your high school. So it is important that your counselor kind of knows who you are. And one way to get to know your counselor is to go in and actually speak with him or her and make sure that you set up appointments. And so they will request as colleges will request that your counselor fills out a report based on this questionnaire, much like the teacher evaluation. So you see they ask for your GPA, is it weighted or unweighted? They ask about class rank, if your school ranks, the class size, and rankings. And then they also ask if you're an Ivy diploma candidate, if you're taking the AP capstone candidate, like all of these different things just to get a better picture of you. So that is really important to know that they're kind of talking about the rigor of your schedule, what kind of classes you took compared to your peers, and if you took advantage of all of the A through G classes offered at your school, those kinds of things. That's what they're looking at. They're assessing rigor and opportunity.
Yeah, so I think that it's important, in terms of, there is an interesting thing at Sequoia in terms of on the right-hand side, there was a lot of debate about, can you say that a student is doing the most demanding if they're not doing the IB diploma? And I think that they came down that they could do that if a student was pursuing all their certificates, but not the exact diploma, because of a lot of different reasons. For a lot of students, it has to do with band, and they didn't want to give up band, which means they couldn't have taken TOK, so they couldn't be a diploma candidate. But they are kind of looking here just to see, what's offered at the school if things are limited, and getting a really good picture of where this student stands in terms of rigor. Okay, so what we saw before was actually from the teacher, right? So this is what the counselor is actually doing for the students. So in the red box, you see that they are assessing, right? Everything from below average all the way up to one of the top percent I've ever encountered in my career: academic achievement, extracurricular accomplishment, and personal qualities and character. Now, counselors at a big comprehensive public high school don't always know the answers to all of these questions, but they do oftentimes make, an incredible effort to figure it out, whether they talk to faculty members or to club advisors, to the student themselves. This is definitely something that they are trying to assess and be very fair about. That being said, when you're looking at a lot of schools that are requiring a counselor letter, I get a lot of families that worry a lot because they're like, well, my counselor doesn't really know me, and how are they going to be able to assess this? Is this letter going to negatively affect you? For the most part, this letter is always neutral. It's not going to hurt you in the application process, except when we start to talk about the part with the red arrow. But in terms of them writing the letter, it's a neutral letter. If they know you well and have an incredible, positive things to say about you, which a lot of times they'll get from the questionnaire that they ask you to fill out, so they do get that information, then it can be a positive thing. But it is never going to hurt a student, especially if their counselor does not have time, to do a full letter or anything like that. The second part of this is that, has the applicant ever been found responsible for a disciplinary violation? This part can be very school specific in terms of how they decide to report things on here. If you are a student that has some type of disciplinary action that is on their school record, you definitely want to talk to your counselor and figure out, how is this going to be reported on my college applications, right? So some schools have policies that they don't report anything, and some schools have policies that they absolutely report everything. So it's important, if you find yourself in that situation, definitely check in with us for one, but also you want to go in and talk and figure out how they're going to answer these questions.
So now switching gears into the college visits and kind of transitioning from away from the letters of recommendation, we just wanted to provide some general tips to get the most out of your college visits as you're coming up on that season, and show some demonstrated interest. So before you all go out on your visits, it's really important for students to research the school and major options so that they kind of know what's offered at the college before they go, and if there's any specific questions that come up. Most tours include an information session with a local admissions counselor, so it's nice to have some questions on hand if you haven't been able to find those on the website and things like that. If you are thinking about personalizing your tour, like you're going to Washington, D.C. and you've never been there before, you can always reach out to an admissions counselor there and say, hey, I would like to sit in on a class, or I'd like to get the feel of campus, and then what are some great things I can do in the area that'll show me all that this area has to offer. And you can do that by reaching out to your regional representative that reads specifically for California. They're typically listed right under admissions, and you can find your specific counselor. If you're thinking about playing a sport, contacting coaches or department professors, especially if you're going into music or art, you can contact the department chair for those specific programs and get a feel for what the culture is like there, and then schedule time to sit in on a class or do department specific tours. During your visit, eating a snack in the cafeteria, walking around where students hang out, those are great ways to kind of get a good feel for the college visit. Roxana always says to do the map test, pull out a map and see how long it takes for somebody to come and offer help. you'll be able to see how interactive their campus is, and make sure that you take pictures, grab the school newspaper, take notes, walk around and drive through the town. Those are great ways to kind of get a feel for the college itself outside of the tour. And then what we're really focusing on the next couple slides is what to do after you visit. What do you do with all of this information that you've gathered? And making sure that students take the time to reflect on the good things, reflect on the bad things, and just to really remember in 3 or 4 months when you start the application process, what it was that drew you to that school. Okay, so that's kind of what we're thinking about before, during, and after your visit.
And, you know, we want you to know that we know when you go on these visits, you think you're going to remember everything about them. We really do. And quite frankly, we go into it every year when we do college visits. Like, I think I'm going to remember exactly what they said at Wake Forest or Northwestern. But it's amazing how quickly after you see the next college, things start to get a little blurry. So here's our recommendation. In terms of what to do after the visit is you want to just take the 10 minutes to write down exactly how you're feeling at that time. Find a coffee house, find some place where there's students or something in the town right surrounding campus, and go through and just give your impressions. What did you like? What did you not like? If you took some pictures, like make sure you remember what those pictures were. And side note on that one, whenever you start a new campus tour, always take a picture of something with the name in it. You know, like the flags on the, you know, on the walkway, or, you know, when you get into campus, the big sign, that'll help you a lot because again, the pictures start to look the same too. So take the time to do that. And what we're going to do, and what we'll show you on the next slide, is that we've made a Google Doc so kids can do it electronically. They can do it on their phones if they want to, or they can take paper copies of kind of a checklist to go through and what you learned about the school, and then rate it while you're there. Was it, you know, did you think it was an A before you went and now you feel like it's B? Or did you go in thinking, yeah, I kind of thought it was a B plus, and walk out saying, wow, that is definitely an A. This is a place that I really feel like I would be really happy. Then write why. And we're also trying to get you to do your pre-work here, right? There's a lot of colleges that are going to ask you, why do you want to come here? And quite frankly, if 2, 3, 6 months have gone by since your visit, it's really hard to remember if you haven't written anything down.
Right, so this part can be as simple as completing this ProCon list. We're trying to figure out the best way to document stuff, and I think we play with this every year, trying to get students to actually do it, right? So if you look on this Google Doc, there's a section for pros, there's a section for cons, and we went with super easy things like campus size, small, medium, or large. Did it feel overwhelming or too small? Was it just right? What is the undergraduate population, right? So a pro to me would be like big campus, small classes, and the students were friendly, right? A con would be the dorms were far from the food, or it took 10 minutes to get to my classes. So think about that in terms of accessibility. The school setting, you can talk about urban, suburban, nice downtown, things to do. What was the campus vibe? For me, a pro would be coffee shops, shopping nearby, and amazing food. A con might be that it's far from the airport. So it's a great campus, but it takes 2 hours from the airport to get to the campus, right? Majors, did they have my major? Were the professors accessible? What about hands-on experiences? For pros, for me, it would be a strong business major. I could do a direct admit to business, and there's a lot of internships. Just to remember, math is really important, right? Cons would be higher standards for direct admit, so it might be harder to get into a direct admit. And then we added things like dorms, sports teams, and I think on the actual Google Doc, not the screenshot, there's also a place to write down any activities that would be important to you. And then write down your overall impressions. So people were friendly and helpful, classes seemed great, lots to do on campus. 3 specific things I learned about my college on my visit that I might not have been able to. You know, every spring they have a community helping events. I could teach swimming as a job on campus. Study abroad is really encouraged. So from that visit, I rated my college as an A. And so I said it was an A because I could see myself there. The sports teams are great. Students have fun and are driven. Study abroad options are endless, and the professors were great, right?
So this is, this is the basics. This should not take you a lot of time to fill out, 10, maybe 15 minutes max. If you feel like going the extra mile, you can also take an extra 5 to 7 minutes and even put things that are even more specific. Like I learned that the econ professor invites the entire class over for dinner at the end of the semester, and I thought that was really cool. I learned that this professor, if you ask him, will go out to coffee and help you brainstorm what kind of internship you might want. Or something to do with, wow, I can work at the rec center and make good money and do something that I love. You know, I mean, there's a lot of different things. So you want to get the info down first and foremost, and then it's kind of up to you how far you take it. Again, a why this college essay, the more specific, the more compelling. So use this time to do that because sometimes it's really hard to remember. So on the last thing, right, after your college visits, so here's the deal. If you like doing stuff on paper, I like doing stuff on paper. That totally works. Take a picture of it in case you lose your paper. Because you want to make sure that you don't lose it. If it's on the computer in your Google Docs, you're probably going to be pretty safe. You're writing down your reflections, your overall impressions, anything that you want to remember, something that really, stood out to you on campus. And then you want to follow up. If there's people that really made your visit special, or people who went out of their way to kind of help you know more about the college, then you know what? Follow up with them. Or if you still have a couple of questions that you didn't get answered, you can definitely email an admissions rep and say, hey, I was on campus and I forgot to ask this question. What is your policy on subject tests, or are there more things that I need to do to be a direct admit to chemistry? The other thing, a lot of times the tour guides are super nice and they'll actually give out their contact information. And if that's the case, it's always nice if it's a school that you're really excited about to, text them back and say, hey, that was a great tour. Thanks so much. Do you mind if I contact you like during the application process if I have any questions? If you meet with someone one-on-one, if you do an interview, or you get to sit down with an admissions rep, I would definitely send a thank you note. Or a thank you email. I tend to think that the notes stand out a little bit more, and I go for both personally, but starting with email will work. Or if you were able to sit and talk with a professor or anything like that, just make sure to say thank you because they're taking time out of their day to really give you a good impression of the school. That's really all that we have to talk about tonight. We're actually under time, which is pretty exciting. But I do want to make sure that people know that you can follow us on Instagram. That's where Jenny and I post a lot of pictures from our visits, and we too are sort of heading out on visits this spring, and little tidbits about schools that maybe you haven't heard of. So that's a great way. We also would love for you to tag us if you take a great picture at a school that you thought was awesome. Go ahead and tag us at CollegeComm so that we can see what you guys are doing. And then for Facebook, there's a lot of great articles on there, and we're sort of posting weekly just things about the process that we think families should know. Thank you so much for attending, and I'm going to go ahead and try to turn off the recording, and if anyone wants to stay on, we can answer questions.